in the know on the campaign. He was pretty connected to the campaign. What do you make of this part of the story?
Yeah, I'm concerned. I'm concerned about it not just because of the potential criminal part of this, but I'm concerned because either the Russians were able to actually acquire Hillary Clinton's emails, or they were able to set up an elaborate dangle that was able to get to someone like Peter Smith, and then potentially by extension to our short-term NSA, Michael Flynn. That is something that we should all be concerned about. Look, Chris, at the end of the day, the criminal part of this is incredibly important, and the American public needs to know what exactly happened and what crimes, if any, were were perpetrated. But the other part of this is what exactly did the Russians do? Clearly, the Russians had a very deep and wide operation going. That door was open, and to date, I have not heard that we have spent $1, increased the forces of counterintelligence to 1 iota, and that really, really concerns me. Yeah. This leaves the door open.
This is you've been sort of talking about this. I want to follow up on this and get back to you for a second, Jill. But Naveed, you've followed up. I mean, there's so much focus on the possible connection with the Trump campaign, the possibility of collusion, what they were doing. But your point, and one that you're hammering home, is this was I mean, just based on what we've seen, the part of the iceberg above the surface, the Russians were up to quite a bit here. there was a lot of different avenues of entry, it would appear. And what you're saying is it's unclear whether those avenues have been rooted out, definitively chronicled, and shut down.
That's exactly right. And look, to kind of bring even home, even if Donald Trump today pled guilty to a crime, that does not close the counterintelligence door that the Russians were able to walk through. And the only way that we can do that, and this is the frustrating part for people in the intelligence community, is that you need to spend resources. We need to admit that this was a counterintelligence failure. If the Russians were successful, this was a failure. And there should be something akin to a 9/11 commission to understand what happened and, more importantly, how to fix it.
Jill, on the earlier story that we started this block with, Ken Delaney saying that Mueller's now compelling testimony, subpoenaing actual testimony before the grand jury from associates of Manafort. How big a step is that?
It's the next logical step. It's what would normally happen in an investigation. But I do want to go back to your last question, because I really do feel and have felt from the very beginning that the underlying crime here, skipping ahead to the obstruction, but really just looking at the underlying crime, could potentially be so much more serious than the break-in at the Watergate. This is something that threatens our democracy at its very core. There were serious attempts and apparently some successes in hacking into our electoral system, and that threatens democracy in a way that a break-in at the DNC never did. So I think we have to really spend time. I agree completely. We need to investigate that, even if no one in the Trump campaign was involved at all. It's a serious thing that needs to be investigated.
All right, I'm going to ask you guys to hold on a second, because we're just getting some breaking news on an extremely busy news night with the hurricane barreling towards Texas, about to make landfall, first Category 4 in 12 years, the first one in Texas since 1961. The president's done two things tonight as he's departed for Camp David. One, he's issued, it appears, the memo about transgender military service, essentially directing James Mattis to have the ability to close the service off from transgender members who want to serve, and leaving the fate of those in the military up in the air. And then, that happened a few hours ago, and now, again, in the midst of this moment, with that category bearing down with the president in Camp David, we just get this. This is the President of the United States